Okay, it's about time we start sculpting, and let's first rename this one. Let's bring it up. Rename this one to Wild West and the other one to Old Structure. Okay, and I feel like starting with this one. And for this one, the Wild West one, I believe I need to start with a rough wood. Okay, I was wrong. And one thing I could do, let's add a layer beneath it, and let's just have the normal map on it. Go to project and untitled. Okay, now let's go to normal and bring the strength a bit down. And adding this one to the normal map will result in a better normal read. Okay, now for wood, let's add a black mask. Let's add this one to the, let's make it wood. It's a wood folder, and go with color selection to select what parts we want them to be wood. Okay, this one, looks like I need to bring the tolerance down. This part, this one, okay, these ones are going to be wood. And let's copy mask, and let's create a new folder called metal. Okay, let's go to materials and add a steel rough. Let's add a black mask and paste the mask, and for inverting the mask we simply go here, right click on the mask and hit invert mask. Okay, now we have the iron in places which is not wood. Okay, and let's do the same thing for this one. Let's go here, and I think overall we're going to use the same material for this one all across. So I think this one could do, but I'm looking for something else. Okay, for the time being, let's live with this one. Okay, now it's better. And let's tile it a bit, for example 2 times. Okay, now this is a good base to start with. And let's go for our Wild West one and hit Control Save to save the file. Okay, now let's add a folder inside this one, and let's put something obvious in it, for example this one, so that we can see what is happening. And wood 1, let's call it wood 1, and color selection, and I want this layer to affect just this place only, so let me delete this one and create a layer. Okay, now we are able to work on this one. So a good rule is always set your base texture and material on wood, excuse me, on photo surface and photo scans which are taken from real world. And for this time I've gone ahead and take in this texture, and in this place let's do the color. And for the color, okay, we have added this one, but we are going to manipulate and change it to see what happens. Okay, we want the tiling to be a bit more. Okay, I think it's good enough. And let's add the levels. I want the color to be pronounced a little bit more. Okay, for example, something like this. And I don't want the color, let's add the wood color variation. Okay, and I don't want it to dominate the whole surface. So let's bring this one down. Okay, now we have easily added some photo sourced image into our texture, which add that touch of realism to it. Okay, and let's go for another level. Okay, I think this is enough. And this is a good starting point to start from. Okay, and let's go add another layer. And for this one, I'm going to tweak the roughness a bit. Let's make it rough variation 1. And let's just control left click on, alt left click on the roughness to activate only the roughness. And let's make it pretty rough. I don't want the wood to shine so much. Let's make it something rough. Okay, and add a fill and add a black mask so that it hides, and we need to give this white data to come up. So for example, you see here we are painting with white stroke. Let me put the roughness to something more visible. You can see the places that we sculpt are going to be white, and revealing the data from the roughness map value that we created here. Okay, let's create a black mask, and instead of manually sculpting all over the place, we're going to use the mask. And for the mask, we're going to add a fill, and in the fill, in the grayscale, let me search for wood. Okay, I think there's just this one. No, let's go for grunge. And let's see something that suits our need. I think this one. And now let's hit C. This is the base color map. This is the height, and this is the roughness. Okay. And the roughness map needs to be a little bit stronger. Okay, and let's bring this one a bit down so that you can see better what is going on. Okay, let's manipulate the mask. I don't want so much contrast. Okay, this is the effect that I'm going after. but I don't want the roughness value to be so low. Let's make it something just for visual interest. Okay, now the roughness map on wood is good enough. Let's save it. Okay, and now let's add another wood by importing from textures.com. Okay, this one is a bit more pronounced than this one. Okay, let's go beneath the roughness and add it with the color. But overall, I think this one needs to be tiled. Let's tile it 4 times. Okay, and now we have that plank that we are going for. Wood color 2. And let's hide it. Let's bring it up a bit. And instead, let's add a black mask and add this one to the cavities. Let's see the effect. Okay, it's fine. Let's manipulate the color a bit. Let's add level. Okay, let's bring this one down a bit and go for cavity mask. Let's see the mask now. Okay, let's go to material. And let's go for levels. And now we can see the colors a bit better. Okay, now I think we're good with this one. Let's go for the higher one. This is the wood one. Let's change its color and add a new folder. And for testing, adding a material to it. Let's call it wood 2 and change the masking to this one. Let's bring the tolerance down. Okay, now we have selected just this area. And let's change its color. Okay, and now I think it's about time we start adding another color. Let's go to projects folder and add another texture. Okay, we added the tree bark. Let's replace it with this one. Let's remove this one and add it here. Color 1 into the base color. And I need to rotate this one 90 degrees. Okay, and change the tiling to something more. Okay, let's check this one. I think this one reads better for what we need. Okay, and let's bring it a bit down. Okay, now we have another wood type here. Let's go for these ones. And we are now doing that thing that I told you, starting from big, going to medium and small and tiny. We are now adding the big shapes, you know, for example, this one, I added a whole texture over it. And for example, for the next part, I might be adding some roughness value, some roughness variations, some color variations, and so on. So uh, adding a constant value and then adding variations. That's the key to creating a good texture. Okay, let's go for another one. Let's add a folder and call it wood 3. And let's mask it. Color selection here. Okay, no, I was wrong. This one. I want it for these wood pieces, and let's bring the tolerance down. Okay, and now I have masked these 4 wood planks that are going to be directional. So let me add a color. Tiling to 4. Okay, I believe this is so good. Okay, this is good for this session. I'll be seeing you in the next session. Okay, now we'll come to the next part where we continue doing other types of woods. So let's go for another one and let's name it wood 4. Okay, and let's put an empty material on it and change the color. Okay, now for this one, I believe I might put this one here. And let me mask it to this part using color selection. Okay, and let's go to layer and name it color 1 and adjust the tiling to something more. For example, something like this, and this one gives it a plank look. And let's fade it out a bit. And I think this one reads pretty well. And let's add a filter to manipulate it a bit. So let's go for HSL. Okay, and let's adjust the colors. And this one gives it a painted wood look, but I don't want it to be like this. Just something slightly different from other woods. And the key here is to keep it neutral as possible, because if this one was a prop that was going to be used in a game for a couple of times, for example, you could do something like this. For example, creating a layer effect and painting, for example, something like this, and going some custom thing like this. But if this is a trim sheet, this piece is going to be repeated a lot of times, and we don't want this sign to repeat itself a lot of times in the game because it breaks the immersion and really destroys the feeling. So the key here in creating trim sheet is staying neutral as possible and avoiding creating so much details that repeat over and over again. Okay, let's go for something else. Let's call this one rooftop. For visuality's sake, let's change the color and put a blank material on it. And let's go for color, and for this one I want something directional. For example, like this one, but something that goes from top and down. And let's separate it by color selection. And I think this won't do. Let's use this one. Change the rotation to 90 degrees. It's always about selecting and seeing what is good and what is not. Okay, so I think I will go with this one. I just want something directional from top to bottom. And we will add more details into this one. For example, a lot more details in these cavities and crevices later on. And create a new one, metal, and add a blank material to it. This one is a healthy metal, and the next one we're going to do is going to be a rusty metal. Okay, let's color select to assign which areas we want to be healthy. This one. Or for metal, we created this one earlier. And in this folder, we do what metalwork is. Okay, let's put it here and do a color selection and go for this one. Let's add this one and this one. Okay, these are the healthy metals, and let's call it metal H for healthy, and add another folder and call it metal rusty. And in this folder, let's change the color to something more visible. Okay, let's go for color selection. We want these metals to be rusty and old and used. Okay, and these and these. Okay, let's go change the material to something more visible. And change this one also to this. Okay, now we have a base for our wood material or Wild West trim sheet. And the next thing we're going to do is adding those medium and small and tiny details. And this pass was the big shapes, and we created the silhouette, the overall shape, and big shapes that are going to stand out from the from so far away, and now we're going to add details that are going to make our read better. For example, when we look at the material from up close, we're going to make that read a lot better. Adding surface details, dust, ambient occlusion, dirt, and a lot of things that we can see. Okay, let's save it out, and always have a backup in case something goes wrong. And let's go here. This is the wood base, and this folder is the folder that we created our wood in. And I think let's clear the mask to see. And let's remove mask. Okay, now I feel like this one has a lot of value to it. Okay, let's hide it, or let's change the blending mode to something. I think darken is good because it leaves the crevices in here and uses some of the data from the material below it. Okay, and you can see how that works. And let's bring the color down a bit. Okay, I think this wood is now going to look good in the game. Okay, now this is the base, and let's go for roughness. By going out and hitting C, this is our base layer. This is the height, and this is the roughness. Okay, let's turn this one off and down. You see how it contributes to the roughness, but I think it's good for now. Let's add another layer and just have the roughness value on. And I want the value to be something pretty high. Let's rename it roughness 2. And let's add a black mask. And I want this one to cover the crevices and the edge data. So let's select a smart mask. Edge is strong. Now you see it has created the data where our edges are so strong, because edges are where the most dirt and dust collect. Okay, let's check it. And here, let me add a fill layer, and I'm going to create something, for example, like this one, something that goes around it, and this is before and after. Let me, for example, do a multiply. It takes away from some of the areas and adds to some of the areas, and breaks that procedurality of the roughness map that we are going to create. Okay, let's go and check. And the roughness is pretty good now. And now let's add some height details. And let's turn everything. Okay, and add a black mask. And again going for edges. But this one is a bit too strong, so let's go to height and bring it down a bit. For example, you could go something crazy like this, but values should be less noticeable. Okay, now for seeing what the modifier stack does, let's bring this one down a lot and manipulating the mask stack by adding a fill. And in the fill area, let's put a grunge map, for example, like this one, that has a lot of contrast to it. Okay, now you see it's all across. And let's go for the mask. This is the mask without the grunge map being applied. And this is the mask, the grunge map mask. And now let's change the blending mode to something like multiply. And it adds and distracts things from this one and from that one and mixing and matching them to get something new. And this is the power of the mask stack in Substance Painter. And I really encourage you to experiment and see what you can come up with. And now let's bring this one down a bit. You see this is the mask that we applied and this one is the new one, taking away some of the areas. Now you see that some areas aren't affected and some areas are. And let's bring the height value to something quite neutral. Okay, and I think let's try to add a color. And for the color, let's use a material. For example, this one. Or this one. Let's change the color a bit. And you see it adds a little rust detail on top of the wood. And this happens in a lot of woods when a lot of chipping away happens. And now let's go for height and let's go for technical parameters and bring the height down a bit. Okay, now when there's a chipping in the wood, it's going down. At position, you could go something extreme, but I really encourage you not to do it. Let's go for something more neutral. And you see here the color is so pixelated, so let's create a fill layer and copy the mask from here. You hit copy mask and paste the mask here. Let's create a black mask and paste into mask. So those same areas now are covered, and now we are assigning a material to this one and tile it so much that it covers the whole area. So let me change the color and tile it a lot. So let's go for something like this and tile it so much. For example, like 4, 8, and you see it adds a little bit of color breakup into this. So now let's break the value, or simply we could add one of those textures that we got from textures.com. Let's go for project, and in this tab let's select color, and for example this one, this has a more rusty look to it, and change the tiling quite a lot. black mask and paste into mask. Let's add a filter on HSL. You could make it darker or lighter depending on the situation you're facing. And I think this one reads well. Okay, so now when we zoom, we could see these details. And now you see the height pixel. The height data is really pixelated when we look up front. For adding a little bit of more height detail, we go to mask tag and add a fill layer. And let's select something like black and white noise. And now let's go to mask view. You see that this is the mask applied all over the surface, but we don't want that. We want this one to be a little bit of breakup to that surface. And let's change the balance a bit, or tiling, for example, something like 16, and a contrast, let's bring it to be a little bit more visible, and let's go to material, and let's see without this one. Let's bring it down a bit. Okay, it adds a little bit of oldiness to the wood. Let's change it to multiply. Okay, now I'm more happy with it because it adds those values that we were looking for. Okay, and now let's add some edge details, and let's activate this one. Okay, this one adds to the material, and I'm going to keep it. Okay, let's do this one and go for a smart mask. Let's see what we come up with. No, I don't want this one. And now it adds to lower parts of the material. You see it has covered the crevices pretty much. Okay, let's go to mask editor, and I'm going to expand this mask a bit more. Go to global balance. Okay, and let's add the material. This one, for example, and tile it quite much. Go for something like 8. Go to base color view to see what that adds to the mesh. It's a tiny little value, but it's useful, and I'm going to keep it. And let's bring up the tiling a lot more. 1632. Okay, now let's add something. For the naming, I'm alone now. I'm using this one for my own project, and I don't want these names to be so complex. But if you are working on a team, I highly suggest you do the namings right. But for this case and for saving time, I'm not doing a lot of name changing to save some time. Okay, and let's go to smart mask and see. No, this one adds a little bit of dust, not a little bit, actually quite much. And let's change its material. And now we need to add some stronger edge highlights. And let's add this white color. And let's go to a smart mask and go for something really strong. Edge. Let's go for concrete edge. Nothing. Let's look at some others. No, not this one. Okay, I think this one will do. Now we need to change that with the material. So let's go to materials and let's try this one or this one. So let's bring the roughness higher a bit because this is the area where most of the dust is collecting. Okay, for the time being, let's delete this one because I'm not happy with it. And let's move on to the next one, which is this tree bark. Okay, the tiling is set to 1 and rotation of 90 degrees. And for this one, let's try to test some of the new masking techniques I've found instead of just using a smart mask. So for the color and for color breakup, let's add it again and let's go for filter and change the color for using something like contrast, for example. Let's bring the contrast higher a bit. Okay, now for masking some of the areas, let's go for mask, and instead of black mask, we are going to use Bitmap Mask. Let's see here what the name of the texture is. It's textures.com 9. Okay, let's add a Bitmap Mask. Textures.com. Okay, this is the mask. Now let's go to mask view. Okay, you see that this is the mask that is being applied to the mesh. So we need to manipulate the mask a bit. And we need to set the tiling to 2 and set the rotation to 90 degrees. Okay, 90 degrees. And now let's look at the color mask. And now let's look at the mask. This is the mask. And now we are using the same image to drive it as a mask instead of using just sculpting data that we got from Blender. Okay, now for manipulating the mask, for example, let's go to levels. This is the mask. and let's separate it a bit. Okay, and these parts are the parts that are going to drive this texture. Okay, let's go to material and let's turn it on and off. Let's do something more visible, for example, turning the contrast really high. Okay, I think by mistake I disabled this channel. Okay, and let's see. Let's bring the contrast pretty high. You see that these areas that we masked are affected, and for using colors like this one instead of, for example, sculpting in Blender, you could add the color from the texture that you have, and all you have to do is adjusting the scale and rotation and offset and anything else you change in this fill area. Anything you do here, you should do that for other places as well. And so, for example, this one is a bit flat. I want something to support this texture as a height map. So let's bring the height map up and add this one. Okay, you see that it adds just the way we want it. It adds the height according to the texture that we are adding, not according to the sculpting that we did in Substance, or excuse me, sculpting that we did in Blender. Now let's see the height channel. Okay, this is the height channel. You can see how dense it is. For here, let's go to height and go to material and bring the height down a bit so that it affects a little bit, just a little bit. Now we can see that we have created a normal data based on the texture that we have, not exactly sculpting in Blender or ZBrush or anything else. Okay, let's look at the normal. Okay, you see how strong it is now. Excuse me, you should have checked the height data. Okay, now it's too strong. Now I want some of the edges to lose color a bit. And for this one also, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy this mask because it follows the rules that I told you, setting the scale and rotation. Let's copy the mask. Copy mask, Control Alt C it is the shortcut. And let's add something else and black mask and paste into mask. And it's using the mask that we created before, just like this one. Okay, let's invert this one, and now you see how it has selected other areas were not selectable in that mask. Okay, for example, like here, and you see that a lot of color variation in here has happened. Okay, let's, instead of that, add this texture to see what happens. Okay, this is good. This is good exactly for color variation. Let's do rotation to 90 degrees and a scale to something like 2. And you see that exactly this mask is doing the thing it should be doing. Okay, and let's change the color to be something like more visible. Add filter, excuse me, add filter and contrast. Let's bring the contrast up a bit to be something more visible. And let's select the base color, and you see how photorealistic it has become just by using these textures. And I'm happy with the results so far. And I think overall I could change the color of this one a bit because it was too white and I think a little bit unnaturalistic. Okay, and now let's move on to next ones, which is these planks. Okay, and as always, let's add something more visible and add a smart mask, for example, edge strong. Okay, and now let's manipulate the color. For example, this one. Okay, it adds that bit of edge detail and breaking it up. Okay, and now based on this one, have this 4 in mind. The scale is on 4 and rotation and offset are untouched. Let's add a color here. And for the mask, we're using a bitmap mask that carries this texture. It's textures.com wood old 10. Okay, let's add the bitmap mask. This is wood old 8 and this is the texture that we're looking for. Okay, and let's go for mask and set the tiling to 4. Okay, and I want these black areas to be selected for this time, and I might change that later on. So let's add a level and hit invert. Okay, now these white areas are selected more. And let's change the contrast a bit to make those areas a little bit more pronounced. Okay, now you see that we have a lot of things in these crevices areas. And let's add this one. No. Okay, this adds a lot more color value to the texture, you see here. Okay, and now for the color, let's add the height map and add the same texture as the height channel. And now let's go to material mode, and it's a chaos really. Let's bring the height value down a lot. Okay, just a tiny bit. Okay, now I think I'm happy with this one. And if you want to change the height data a lot more separately. You're going to add levels, and instead of base color, you have to go to height channel and manipulate the height separately. For example, like this one, adding a lot of height to it. Let's go to material mode, and you see that it's manipulating the height data. Okay, and let's add a little bit of procedural dirt to this one because we're going to use this one for the house card, and the house card is rolling across the dirt and mud always. So let's add a material, something dirty. For example, this one could be good. Let's search for mud. Okay, that one we will use. Let's select that mortar wall and change its roughness value a lot because the mud is wet technically. Okay, and let's change the tiling a bit. Black mask, a smart mask, and dirt. Another type of dirt. Okay, I'm happy with this one. Yes, this one is good. And when we are trying to UV this one, this tiling detail will add more realism to it. And you will see just in the modeling phase. Okay, now let's go for the next one, which is this wood. And I think pretty much it's good. It doesn't have anything to be manipulated. Everything is good on this one, I think. And now this one. We have a lot to do with this one. Okay, let's add a color. We want the edges to be more visible. Okay, just like this one. And let's go to project and add this texture to the mix. Let's separate the color. And let's manipulate the color a bit. And let's do this one. Rotation to a scale to 4, for example, and rotation to 90 degrees. Okay. All we need to do on this one is highlighting these edges and these darker areas to separate the tiles from each other. Okay, let's go add another one. Go to Smart Mask, and here we go for something that goes into cavities. Yes, just like these parts. And let's add this one too. And let's change the color a bit to something more pronounced compared to this one. Okay, and change the tiling to something more visible. Okay, let's go to its initial value and now let's disable this one and go for something more roof-like. Let's go add a fill layer. Okay, and let's go to project and use this texture instead. I want just the color value. Let's set the scale to be something like 4. Now we see already this one is looking a lot better, and we don't want to use this one fully, and so let's bring this one down. And by going to offset, let me check something that matches the height beneath it. Okay, let's do something like this, like 0.17. Okay, I think okay, this one is good enough. And I need to add a filter, and let's add a HSL. Okay, and now let's add these ones, these chipped edges. Okay, I feel I'm happy with this one. And now let's go for the iron part. And we are not doing any magic because this thing is a trim sheet and shouldn't have any significant details and should be pretty generic to avoid repeating data. Okay, let's go here. And now we're doing our thing with the metal healthy. Okay, for the metal healthy, let's add another smart material. I think this one is good. Yeah, this one is definitely a lot better than the one. And for this one, let's go for something older. And this one is pretty good also. And I'm totally happy with how this one is looking so far. Okay, and let's go for this one. I believe I could manage to make this one a lot better. Let's go for this one. Okay, I think this color is a lot better. And let's see the properties of the fill area. It's 4, and let's shoot this one to 0. We don't want too much data. And this one, I copied the whole thing. Now let's add a layer and add black mask. And let's add a fill layer. And here I'm going to use the same texture. Use the same roofing texture, just like this one. Tiling used to be 4. And offset, let's copy it. Okay, now we have it fully here. Let's check the mask. And it's perfectly matching it. Okay, so let's go for color and put something here. Okay, now we need to make these tiles pop a little bit more. Now let's go to mask. Okay, this is the mask. And I want to invert it and have the tile in these black areas. So let's add a levels and press invert. Okay, this is fine. And now let's add a level to tighten that up a bit. Okay, I think we're good now. You see that it has created a separation between the tiles. Let's check it on and off. And we need to add a height channel and add the same texture. And let's bring the height down pretty much. I don't want it to be so rough. Okay, and now let's add the levels. Okay, I believe now this one is looking a lot better. Okay, checking that. And now let's add some dirt and overall crevices. Let's go higher. And one thing we could do to make the overall texturing a lot better is adding a paint layer, not fill layer, paint layer. And let's go to base color and set it to pass through. And add a filter. And in the filter, let's tap sharpen. Okay, and now it adds a little bit of sharpness to the whole texture, but we don't want that to be so much. Let's bring it down a bit. This is without sharpen, and this is with a little bit of sharpen. Okay, I believe this one is good. Okay, and the sharpen is helping our texture a lot. And we could also copy this one and bring it here and paste it above the layer. Yeah, it's working. And now let's go here to see what we need. And I think I need some dirt on this one. So let's go here and copy the mask of this one. Let's copy mask and black mask and paste mask. Paste into mask. Okay, but I don't want these areas to be affected. Instead, I want these areas. Let's check the invert. Okay, and now let's add the levels to manipulate this one a little bit more. Okay, I want the dirt to be on this area. So you see, it's white. And now let's add a texture to this one and test it to see what is good and what is not. Okay, it's add a little bit of dirt in here. Okay, and one thing I could do is disabling, let's see. Okay, I'm totally happy with this one. And let's call this one done. Okay, let's look at it. It's even looking good when we are looking from up close. Okay, see you in the next session when texturing this one.